Welcome to the Movement Driven Podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger, where we help you bridge the gap between pain and performance. Each week, we'll share strategies, insights, and real-life applications to help you keep moving and stay driven. Now, let's get into this week's episode of the Movement Driven Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Movement Driven Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Greg. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Darren?
I am doing wonderful. So we just recently had opening day come out to play. My husband is a huge baseball fan. He played it like his whole life. Big Mariners fan. So I am now a Mariners fan.
There you go.
You know,
you're a good wife.
Happy hubby, life is bubbly, I think we've said before.
I've never heard that.
I've heard that from you.
No, you didn't.
I swear.
No, you didn't. You definitely didn't. Can you text that to my wife, please? Because I only know happy wife, happy life. That's all I know.
Yeah, well, happy wife, happy life. But, you also have to have your man happy, too. Because if he's happy, you're happy.
Preach!
You know? Anyway, so we're basically first full month of baseball season. An exciting time. What I love about baseball is that there's just so many games to watch. Like, it literally, and it's all week long.
That's true.
Yep. And so, it's like Mariners play against Yankees, and it's like you literally have 3 opportunities to watch them play like the same team.
Right.
So very different from a lot of other sports, but, really just fun to be a part of in general. Mm-hmm. But today, specifically about baseball, we're going to talk more about some injuries that happen during baseball. So we're probably going to see these as the season progresses, maybe even just in the off season. But what are the 3 main injuries that you typically see when it comes to baseball players?
I would say, especially when we're talking about like the adolescent age group, from anywhere from like starting to hit puberty through, high school and college. I think everybody knows about like UCL tears, more from the common surgery that fixes them, which is Tommy John. So I would say that's the most seen thing. And then the other 2, when we're talking about like arm injury specifically, are little leaguer's elbow and little leaguer's shoulder. And that's going to occur more during adolescence when they're really in their growth spurts.
Yeah.
But I think to you kind of hit on it too. I do want to discuss when a lot of these injuries happen, despite like what they are, whether it's Tommy John or little leaguer's elbow or little leaguer's shoulder. A lot of these issues are because of too much volume, and we see them often early in the season where we haven't done enough in the off season and we've ramped up volume too quickly. And then obviously like later in the season when fatigue's starting to set in, we see them too. So those are the 2 times when we see them, for both volume related, but for slightly different reasons. But I think that's important, especially for the parents listening. We'll talk about that a little bit more throughout the episode, but that's important to talk about for sure.
Yeah. So, I know we basically just kind of talked about this. So you would say that a lot of these injuries sometimes happen in the early season and then late in the season, right?
Yeah, right. So like in the early season, I think it's more if you haven't had a sort of a training program that has incorporated some throwing or some throwing like movement patterns leading up to when you actually commence your throwing program at spring training for the pros, but the start of the season and practicing for our little leaguers. The muscles, so even like if somebody feels like I feel strong, I feel healthy, I feel refreshed, the muscles tend to respond quicker than our tendons do. So it takes a little time for our tendons to build up this resiliency to the stress that we put them through, ligaments as well. And so early in the season, kids go from 0 to 100 real quick, maybe literally if they got enough velocity, but they go 0 to 100. And that's when we see a lot of the breakdown. 3rd, 4th game of the season, they're already having issues. And then throughout the middle of the season, relatively quiet in terms of arm injuries go. But then if we have too much volume over the course where we've just thrown it too many times, especially for our pitchers, then later in the season, we start to have a breakdown. And so both of those issues, I think, can be prevented by having the proper off-season training. The early on issue is more about timing and ramping up in the right way. And then the later on is, hey, did you have enough strength training and endurance training so that your body is resilient enough to last the season? Did you do your strength training the right way in the off season? So off season prep is definitely or lack thereof is what leads to a lot of these injuries.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk Tommy John. What exactly is it?
So Tommy John was a baseball player, and he was the first one to have this surgery. So the Tommy John repairs a ligament called your UCL. Your UCL stands for ulnar collateral ligament, and that's right in the inside of the elbow between, it's connecting the humerus to the radius bone. And so when a thrower throws, we create a tremendous amount of tension and force through this area. And I would say tension is maybe not the right word. We actually create more of a gapping of this part of the elbow. I don't know if, Dare, you've seen, like, if you catch a pitcher in mid throw and their arms way back here, their body's coming forward. Think about how much is happening at that elbow in terms of that joint is separating. So that joint's separating, then we're putting some tremendous amount of pull on that ligament, and there's specifically the anterior band is taking so much of that. And so when that ligament breaks down, it can tear, just like get an ACL tear in your knee. You can completely tear this, and that requires surgery if you want to continue to throw. And so with Tommy John, I think we even still hear this today, but definitely when I was working in Miami years ago, there were baseball dads. Let me watch what I say. There were baseball dads that would actually ask me, should we get the Tommy John so we can throw harder? And that's been this big misnomer that Tommy John makes your throw harder because you tighten up the ligament. And I'm like, this isn't, what was that movie? Little League, was it Little Big? No, it was Rookie of the Year. Rookie of the Year was the movie where the kid played for the Cubs and he pitched. Did you see this movie?
It sounds familiar, but I don't think I've seen it.
Okay, I watched it plenty of times, so I'm filling you in. This kid like broke his arm, and they casted him like this for some reason, and then they take off the cast, and he like breaks the doctor's nose because he just whips around. And I don't know if that movie did it, but these baseball dads of today seem to think, oh, I'll just get this surgery, I'll tighten up the ligament, he's going to throw harder. Bullshit. Sorry. It's not the surgery that does it. It's the rehab following the surgery that makes these guys throw harder. And to that point, what we do see is kids and teenagers and young adults in the pros who have this surgery come out of it throwing harder when their rehab is done the right way. And so what I tell people is like, you don't need to do surgery. You just need to do the rehab, or what we would say is prehab, preventative rehab, as a way to prevent the UCL tear from happening in the first place, as well as increasing velocity. They're all the same exercises. There's no magic one that does something and one does something else. The things that prevent injury are the same things that I would use to increase velocity in my throwers. And so when we're talking Tommy John, a lot of it comes from working on the scapular positioning, working on the scapular stability and strength, making sure T-spine is mobile. A lot of it comes down to the legs. Are you using your legs to throw mechanically the right way? Do you have enough power? Similar to what we talked about the golfers, are you using the ground to create force to throw that ball rather than just whipping your arm around and putting it all through the elbow? And we talk a lot about rotator cuff strength and working the backside. I know I've talked to some PTs in the major leagues lately, and their emphasis a lot on the serratus anterior muscle, which is kind of like our shoulder blade punching muscle. So that has a huge play in scapular stability, like I was mentioning before. So it's really kind of recreating an athlete from foot all the way through the hand. Are you doing everything you can be doing to take that stress off the elbow and still increase velocity and not just whip it around? So yeah, Tommy John, UCL tear, we need the Tommy John surgery to repair it. And then if the guys are doing the rehab the right way, they are coming out throwing the ball out better. But don't just go get a surgery to get a surgery, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for the younger athletes, is it that they're tearing ligaments early on, or is it more like stress on certain muscles or ligaments?
Yeah, so like typically when we're younger, our ligaments are more lax. So because they have more give, they don't tend to tear. They might get a little sprain here and there. But they're actually working with our body. That's why you move a baby around. Most babies can do like a full straddle, and then by the time they get to 4 years old, it's like, what happened? you have more laxity in your tendons, in your ligaments early on. So during that adolescence, kind of early adolescence period, we don't see a lot of UCL tears. Definitely by like 15, 16, 17, we can start to see them if they've already kind of went through most of their puberty stage as boys. But in that, as early as 8 or 9 through like 13, sometimes even 14, what we're seeing is little leaguer's elbow and little leaguer's shoulder. And both of these are more of an issue in the growth plate. And this can be really concerning where first you'll see some pain in the area. And then if you take an x-ray, you might see like a little bit of gapping in the growth plate itself, which is a sign that we need to actually rest from throwing. It's not just like, oh yeah, take it easy. No, like we need to stop throwing. Sorry, mom and dad. This tournament's not the most important in the world. They're going to be fine. They're still on the pace to be a major league pitcher. They're 8. You could tell I've had this conversation once or twice. You know, I had 8-year-olds where they have x-ray proof of growth plate widening, and the dad's like, can he throw in 3 weeks? Okay. Oh, I should
maybe check in on their mental health.
Yeah, dude, sorry. None of this matters. Like, I remember my coach would say, like, none of the shit that you've done before. I don't care about your Cooperstown World Series. It's about high school. It's about college. It's about the pros. Those are the championships that matter. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox for now and make this more enjoyable for everyone listening. But if I'm talking to you, then listen up, Pops. But we have to respect this. It is the kind of thing where, oh, you could still play through it and it won't make it worse. It'll just be a little pain. No, this is the kind of thing where if you play through this, his growth plate will fracture. And if it fractures, that could affect the growth of that limb. And then we're talking about a whole slew of problems in life in general and say goodbye to throwing career forever. So let's take the 4-week break. Let's rehab. Let's progress the right way. Let's fix the underlying issues on why your child broke down in the growth plate area. And let's make sure that he is pitching for years to come if that's what he truly loves to do, rather than the one tournament against the team, the arch nemesis team that really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, growth plate widening, growth plate issues that can lead to, like I said, growth plate fractures, which can be very painful for these kids. I mean, bone pain is very painful. It's super sensitive, and it can lead to like more microfractures and need for surgery later on. So yeah, we don't want to mess with the little leaguer's elbow or little leaguer's shoulder at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So all that being said, if a young kid or, middle school, high school, even athletes now, what should parents watch out for, and what should the athlete his or herself look out for?
Well, I think it's kind of the same answer there. I think what parents don't realize, or athletes themselves, the first sign that we see with any kind of arm injury typically is in pain. There's often, in a good way, there's a precursor of a sign that's kind of warning you before we get to the injury stage of the feeling of like a dead arm or the feeling of fatigue. So this is something that like baseball players just intuitively know. Like I'm sure if you talk to Doug, you know what I'm talking about. I played baseball my whole life. When your arm just feels like it doesn't have the pop, it doesn't have the juice, velocity starts to dip, and there's no explanation why. You haven't necessarily thrown a lot that week. But if you're seeing drop in velocity or the feeling of fatigue throughout the shoulder and the elbow, and you just don't have the oomph behind your throws, then that's a sign that something's not working right. And let's kind of give your body some rest and then start doing some prehab stuff or exaggerate the rehab that you're doing before it gets to something's actually broken down. So I would say that's the first thing that you should watch out for is the velocity dropping. That's a red flag for sure. If the kid is saying his arm feels tired, feels heavy, it's time to take a break and not pitch that day. You can take a week off from pitching and just light tossing. But especially what I see with we were talking earlier about a lot of these injuries happen early in the season. So this is more referring to like the end of the season. But when we talk to parents more locally around here in Florida, baseball is year round. And one of the biggest things I have to plead with parents is for their kid to take 6 to 8 weeks off a year from throwing completely. Go play another sport, gain some skills in that sport that will carry back over to baseball. There's a lot of evidence that says playing multiple sports, especially at the younger age, is better off for development in the one sport that they specialize in later on. There's a lot of evidence that show it prevents injury in both sports overall. If you look at, I always say this, if you look at every quarterback in the NFL, they were all multi-sport athletes in college. They all played baseball. At least high school, maybe not college, but in baseball, or excuse me, in high school, they were multi-sport athletes for sure. And so I don't know why we're doing so much sports specialization by 11 years old these days. But I think kids should still continue to play multiple sports until late middle school, high school. So if you're one in Florida, in Georgia, in Texas, in California, and your kid's throwing all year long, stop him or her and get them to take some breaks. So that's my biggest piece of advice. But definitely if they're having dead arm, if they're having a drop in velocity, time to take a little break.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add about this specific topic that you'd like our audience to hear?
I think I covered most of it. I tried to not be too insulting. Maybe I'll wrap it up with saying, parents, please listen to the professionals that you're trusting to handle the care of your children, and don't, it is a complex that we have. I talk to other PTs and other chiros about this all the time. I had to have a conversation with the parent of, your kid needs to rest and it didn't go well. We're terrified of having this conversation with you. It's something that we do and we will do it, but we know the reaction we're going to get. So please help us out by not putting so much pressure on your kids that this one tournament, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter for their professional development of their sporting career. So make sure you listen to your provider, do the right things, take the rest when it's needed, do the right rehab exercises, and I promise you everything will be as good as it can be if you do all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Greg. I think this was a great episode. So if you are a parent listening and you've got a child that is playing baseball or just getting started in it, a good idea might be to have them come visit Dr. Greg, get a movement assessment. So just that way you can start good habits of mobility early on, so that as they're developing and growing in the sport, they're also developing good mobility skills, good setup, so that they could potentially even avoid having the surgeries altogether, and then already be stronger when it comes down to those more high intensity, high velocity times. And especially there's a new league here in Jacksonville, that Jacksonville Competitive Baseball League, that is for, college and older kids, or guys playing sport
in and out of the minors too.
Yeah,
some former minor leaguers.
Yeah, for sure. So a good idea for them as well would be, as you're playing in these competitive leagues, get looked at, get a movement assessment, so that you too can get stronger without having to have a surgery. And doing your rehab, you can do your prehab, so that that's all set up ahead of time.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. Greg, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to the Movement Driven Podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger. Want to see how we're helping people in Jacksonville bridge the gap between pain and performance? Head on over to movementdriven.com. Until next time, keep moving, stay driven.